It's always very helpful at the beginning of a talk like this to be aware of what ideas there are in the mind about oneself and the person who is giving a talk. Because these ideas in the mind about what one is, what the person who is talking is, what one's relationship is with the person who is talking or with the person who is listening. These ideas are not just passive things, they're very active, actively affecting our listening, our perception of what is being said or heard. Is one aware that how affected the mind is in listening by what one thinks the person is like who is talking or listening? Wanting to hear certain things is another thing that affects the listening, or afraid of hearing certain things affects the listening. May entirely distort what is being heard or block it out. It's a marvelous thing to become aware of these mechanisms of the mind, because only in becoming aware of them is there a possibility that they stop interfering in direct perception, direct listening or looking. Because one could say it's impossible to become aware of all ideas or to put them aside. But that's already another idea. It's another conclusion. Can this mind be approached as openly as possible in observing what is going on? Really being in touch with images about each other, or the power of the memory of what a person reminds one of, a person who is giving a talk and other people sitting silently around this person. That situation evokes memory, doesn't it, of a kind? Memory of similar situations in the past. And if this is not directly seen or perceived, then this memory acts, imprinting itself upon the present situation. Imprinting the notion that there is authority talking. And all of our attitudes toward authority, either learned attitudes of submission or rebellion, so can there be freedom from these active ideas and memories by being aware of them, being aware of their power, and listening simply? Is it possible? Is such freedom possible? Some people say immediately, it's not possible, this is impossible. because of such and such physiology or conditioning and so forth. That's another idea which limits the openness of perception, the openness of an innocent, fresh perception, which is based on nothing other than listening. Not agreeing or disagreeing, simply an openness of wondering what it is that is being talked about, whether it is so, and to look within, now or whenever, whether what is said is actually so. And maybe it may not be, but it's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of finding out directly. Now, moment to moment living, whether indeed there are ideas of another person and these ideas distort or inhibit or block out what the person is saying. I don't mean just at this moment, but in our daily relating with each other. How quickly an idea comes up. What she's saying, what he's saying, and then the caught upness in memory and reaction and the shutting down of this whole listening apparatus, listening instrument. Shutting down or breaking down. It doesn't function completely anymore. And what is heard in a distorted or limited or blocked way, it brings up reaction, doesn't it? One reacts to what one has just heard, and it may not have been what the person has said. And the reaction to that brings a reaction in the other person, and that reaction brings a reaction in me. And then something is there between us which operates in moods and feelings and emotions, physically, organismically, creating further images about each other. Residues that are stored in the mind and immediately evoked when the person comes to mind, the memory of the person, the whole scene comes back to mind, which is also linked with other scenes earlier in life that were of a similar nature. One wasn't understood or heard or not talked to properly or disregarded or slighted. And so we live in this network of images and reactions and inhibited direct perception of what is actually going on inside and outside, within and in front of us. Yesterday, we had a discussion period in Springwater. And one person who started out the discussion was saying something like this. I didn't remember it verbatim, and that doesn't matter. May not be exactly what the person said, but here it is. Here is what is remembered. I haven't come to this place much at all in the last 4 years or so, because honestly I feel like a failure. Deep sense of failure with regard to this work that you're doing here. A sense of failure because I cannot do attention from moment to moment. And rather than coming here and feeling the pain of failure, the reminder of what I can't do, which I ought to be doing, because I've listened to zillions of talks, I stay away. Living with my distracted life, with my distractions. Movies, TV, drinking some beer here and there. Not bothering about the whole thing. What I'd like to look at together here this evening for the time being, maybe we'll have some time afterwards to ask questions or discuss things, is what this sense of failure is that so many of us feel sometime or another. A feeling of failure. Maybe we can even ask what a feeling is, whether it's of failure or something else. Are we all into this, to look at this, what it means to have this feeling of failure? What starts up in the mind when a question like this is asked? What is a sense of a deep feeling of failure? Do explanations come to mind? Why it is that I feel a failure? Memories come to mind, how I've always been called a failure or made to feel a failure by my parents or teachers who were disappointed in me, ambitious about me, and then disappointed in my not living up to their expectation. I've had some ambitions myself, but for some reason I never amounted to anything. Other people always excelled, did better than I. Maybe starting with brothers and sisters, and in school, at college, or in gym class. And the mind now putting out explanations, reasons, analysis of what one has called this feeling of failure. because somebody is asking, what is it? What is this feeling of failure? And the mind provides explanations and descriptions and memories, historical chronology, how it's always been or how it started. Or one may say, I don't know how this all started. I don't remember much about my earlier years. All seems very hazy, but I do feel this sense of failure. And somebody persists in asking, what is that? What is this feeling of failure? Maybe some more explanations, but someone persists in asking, what is it beyond all explanation? Or looking for the causes, analyzing it. What is it right now at this moment, this feeling that manifests so strongly, or that you have just told me manifests so strongly? What is it? Can we touch it? Go into it? Explore it? Maybe the person would say, I feel a real dragginess in my muscles, tension, tightness in my chest, queasiness in the stomach. Feel gloomy or depressed. The energy is low. Maybe this is what one comes upon next, once the explanations are gone. Just what is actually manifesting palpably, concretely, physically. And is one really in touch with that? Or just with the words again? The labels? The description? Do you see the difference between saying I have a tightness in my chest and sticking with these words and the effect of the words? Or can there be direct touchness with what these words, tightness in the chest, or some pain in the solar plexus, or whatever there is, tension in the muscles, in the back, headache, low energy, depressed feeling? Can one be directly in touch beyond the words with what the words are actually referring to? Can we look whether this is possible? Feel it out? In the midst of whatever tension or pain or discomfort there is, there's also breathing going on, isn't there? One has used that word all one's life, my breath, my inhalation or exhalation, but what is it actually? Without the word. It's tremendous to ask that question, isn't it? And to listen to it, to feel, listen, sense it. This constant movement, rhythmic movement of what? It's going on, isn't it? Can one be in touch with it? And also hear the sound of the motorcycle? the breathing, the sound of the traffic, the tightness in the chest, the sounds in the room, low energy, high energy. The words aren't the important thing, but there's something going on directly, isn't there? And it's directly perceivable, isn't it? The sound of the windows, the woodwork, the airplane, the breathing, the heartbeat. Can one feel the heartbeat? Or whatever that is? It's not the word. Something is happening. But we were wondering what the feeling of failure is, a sense of failure. In the midst of all what is going on this moment, what is that sense? What creates at this moment, as I'm saying I'm feeling a failure? Do the words themselves, the way I describe myself to myself, have something to do with it? The idea of myself as a failure, the image, the word, the idea, what I am, what I've always been, what other people have told me I am, does that have some connection with the feeling of low energy, depression, tightness in the chest, or tension in the muscles? Someone is asking that question. Can one examine it? Not say yes it does or no it doesn't or it's impossible to tell, but take that as a challenge. Is it possible to see, listen, hear? Don't be too attached to the words. Be aware inwardly that we talk to ourselves about ourselves in vague terms or very explicit terms. And that the way we put things to ourselves about ourselves has an effect on this whole organism. Can that connection be grasped, not just intellectually? That's one way of grasping it. It makes sense, doesn't it? That the way we talk to ourselves about ourselves has an effect on the body. Because the whole organism, thoughts and their circuit to the muscles, to the organs, is all interconnected. And back from the organs and muscles to the brain for further thought. It's one network of electrochemical, magnetic, whatever, movement. So that makes sense as an explanation intellectually, doesn't it? And yet, can it be caught directly as it takes place? As one thinks about the Springwater Center, the idea that this is a place where I ought to be attentive, and where people who go there are mostly attentive, and I'm not. I can't do it. And the impact of those words on the organism, linking up with previous impacts of the past, of not having been able to do what other people can do or what one thought other people could do. I'm not trying to convince myself or you of something, but to invite to look directly, which is possible. That the moment we say something to ourselves, or about the other person, that has an effect on the body. An instant effect. Something is being excited. Joyful feelings, pleasant feelings, or sad feelings, unpleasant feelings, painful feelings? Can one test that out for oneself and see it from moment to moment when it comes into awareness? Most of the time we're not aware of this. And we think we're saddled for life with certain feelings, which is the way I am, we feel, we think. And yet we can examine how does it come into being from moment to moment. It's observable, it's detectable. And not only that, but in such observation which is without judgment, without saying this is right or wrong, good or bad, just seeing it happen, there can be an interruption of this whole process, a pausing in it. And in that pause, something new come into being. A freshness, a fresh energy. See, we are so convinced that the feelings, in quotation marks, that we have is something given. Something to put up with, suffer from. And we don't see how they come into being. That most of them, if not all of them, are initiated or excited by thought. Thought about me the way I am and you the way you are and have been and will be. And that thought of me and you, does that represent a reality? Is there a separate me? Is there a separate you? Apart from the different organisms, the different bodies, with their different inheritance and conditioning, past. But the idea of me being different from you is the most powerful idea human beings harbor, with the most powerful feelings that go with these thoughts about me and you, our separateness, our differences, the division between us, insurmountable up to a degree. And we're questioning all of that. Where do those ideas arise? Can they be seen as they arise and questioned? And the effect of the idea on the whole organism be felt directly as it happens? To feel failure, there has to be a me that has failed. What is that me that has failed, or that feels failure, a sense of failure? Are these two separate processes? Me and my failure? Or is it all one stream of thought / feeling, mutually exciting each other? creating each other all the time, recreating each other. And with this deep sense of discomfort and isolation that plagues all human beings. I've talked for about half an hour, was wondering whether people would like to say something or ask something. Regarding what we call meditative inquiry or attending, listening. Someone talks about it. And doesn't just talk about it, but in talking about it also listens and attends. Does that become something in the mind that I am supposed to do, an idea? The idea of a task which I ought to be doing. And then reflecting upon past day or past month or year, summarizing, as it were, for myself. I haven't paid much attention. I haven't done much meditative inquiry. Therefore saying to myself about myself, I can't do it, or I'm no good at it, I'm a failure. Is attending, listening to someone breathing, whether it's here or there, doesn't matter. Listening to breathing, to the creaking woodwork. Is that a task? Into which I ought to be putting effort, but I don't want to, or I can't. And therefore I say to myself, why do it? Or is that all idea, thought, notions, which close up this openness of perception of just simply listening? Whether it's to the television or movie or the feel of a bottle of beer in the hand. Walking, sitting or lying down? Is it a task to be momentarily aware of it? Or does it happen? The sound of traffic. The idea is I ought to pay attention, but in fact there's only the hum of the motors, isn't there? The thought says, I hear that, and creates a division between a listener and what the listener is hearing. But in listening momentarily, there's only the roar of the motor, isn't there? Or the footsteps on the stairs. Can there be a glimpse of the fact that thought creates the division between me and you, me and the things that I hear or see or feel? Does this make any sense? Asking in this fashion and wondering about it. And for a moment just being all ears or all eyes. Taking in every single sound, this moment.
Toni, we often associate listening to a talk with work. We talk about giving a talk as being arduous work. Is there something necessarily different in listening to a talk, or as you described, just in being aware of holding the beer bottle or watching the television, and that back to this sense of failure that one can't do it, and the idea that maybe it implies an effort or a work with some results. It just struck me there might be some, after doing something arduously like listening to a talk, then you go out and you watch TV, it seems like you're not doing anything anymore. It seems like something is missing, that involvement. Or you catch what I'm trying to say?
You're contrasting, as it were, the ardor of listening to turning the TV on and forgetting about the whole thing, something like that.
In a sense, it's like if I watch my cat, he seems to always be there, and yet if he hears something outside, there's a definite change. He's up, his ears are up, his whole energy seems to be focused on what he's listening to, the mouse in the grass. Yet when he's resting, there's still some kind of totality of this cat there, which oftentimes I might not feel in myself when I'm lying down and all the thoughts are going and the tensions in the body and the comparisons and so on and so forth. So by the same token, here I am listening to this talk, and there's a sense of work in a way. Energy is required. This shifts. I mean, sometimes I feel I'm trying to listen to you, which doesn't seem to work. That's a certain kind of energy that's being used. There's something I need to get from you or need to understand, and there's other times when the mind's whirling and I'm realizing I'm thinking about something else entirely differently. But when there is some attention to what's going on, there's an energy that goes with it. It seems like if I think about it, it seems like a whole complex issue, which may bring up in my mind later a feeling, well, I'm not doing this work now because this energy isn't there, because I'm not working at it, because.
And yet, a moment of coming to that these thoughts are going on in the mind, is that an effort? That these thoughts that you're just all listing there can be an instant awareness that this is what has been going on in the mind. And at that moment of being aware of that, is an effort being made?
No.
But then thought arises and says, I ought to keep this attention going, which is here right now, because this is what I should be doing, or what I had going for me once, and with that there's more thought, and maybe thought about effort. And if we think about making effort, they've measured this once. Even the thought of lifting a weight sends electrical impulses through the muscles. But you had an interesting question. Is a cat that is relaxing and yet at any time responding to a sound? That's what you were saying?
Yeah.
Is that the same as relaxedly watching television or resting, and yet at any time moving with something or being aware of something that's there? Yeah, that's possible, isn't it? Most of the time it isn't happening because we get very absorbed. I don't know why it is that cats or animals don't get so absorbed, but probably because of this minimal thought activity, which is probably the most absorbing thing. Thought about, one doesn't just watch a television show, but one becomes identified with the person that is in it. And this connects with my whole occupation and preoccupation about myself, which is the most absorbing thing for all of us. My woes, my pleasures, my pains and fears. So, what was your question? Starting with the ardor of listening and the ardor of talking, the energy of it. Ardor is a dangerous word. Implies somebody who is arduous. Well, there's a difference, a division between doing this and the rest of my life, which was what the man brought up yesterday.
Right.
And because I see this division and express this division in thought to myself or in talking with each other, therefore something happens to the mind and body. The thought has created a division and the body reacts. So there was. With tied up energies, blocked energies. I can't do it, it's too hard. I don't have that kind of energy. Others do, I don't. But the energy of attending or listening does not require the idea of me making an effort. We think it does, because this is how we think. But it doesn't. An energy of attention is there when there's no preoccupation with thoughts about me and what I ought to do or shouldn't do. When that is at rest, like a sleeping cat. Always ready to perk right back up when I'm called into question. Somebody questions me or insults me or slights me.
if there isn't much effort, doesn't have to be a lot of effort involved in paying attention, why is it so much easier to fall back into the habit patterns of not paying attention when watching TV?
That's a good question, isn't it? And to beware that one doesn't make an idea of there being no effort involved in attention. Just to leave all of it as unfixed as possible. But leaving the question alive, why is it so easy to fall into, not I shouldn't fall into, just having some curiosity about it. If there's some curiosity about it, maybe there is going to be some attention as I reach out to turn on the TV or whatever I'm doing. Not in order to prevent myself from doing it, but to observe what all goes into it. What are the expectations? What are the thoughts, the moods, the feelings? So that instead of just doing it so unawares, it becomes alive with insight into what is going on. Or observation. The word isn't important. Because I've asked that question. Why this constant falling, as it were, into inattention? Well, one could even wonder, well, how does this happen? And one can't get a hold of it. Because when it happens, there's no attention. And when there's no attention, all manner of thought goes on about me and you and what I'll do or what I did. We're not saying it's good or bad, right or wrong, but it's interesting, isn't it?
It's almost as though there's a real strength in that force of habit. I mean, it's...
Yeah, tremendous, tremendous. And so we're all reinforcing each other in it too.
What would it be like if one was constantly aware of what he was doing, constantly aware, then how much focus would be upon oneself? I mean, how would you, how would that work? Seems like you'd be very much focused on yourself.
Well, what is the self?
If you're constantly aware.
Maybe this is idea. I'm not trying to contradict you, but this is a thought which is expressed very often, or a way of thinking. Wouldn't this awareness be constant focusing on myself, which is the product of our way of thinking, to bring up such thought. But maybe it isn't at all. Maybe it makes very transparent what the self is, and therefore a capacity to be in touch with everything else that goes on beside the self. At least for moments at a time. Let's not bring up any perfect ideal of being constantly aware. There's no such thing that I know of. But the way we live normally is a constant preoccupation with ourselves. Or, if we think this is very bad and reprehensible and not morally right, then the self thinks of other ways of being altruistic or taking care of others, and yet to satisfy the sense of self that I'm worth something, which is still preoccupation with my worth. awareness could shed some light on that, on how we live. And where we live under the sky, on the earth, among trees and birds, even in a city.
So in a sense, if you became aware of all of those things, you wouldn't even have a sense of yourself. You would be maybe free of that.
Maybe. If it's understood, if it's seen through for what it is, maybe it can abate at moments or for periods of time. And when that's taking place, then there can be touch with everything around us, and which is so closed off when there's this concern with, you understand? It is 9:30 now, and we will end here for today.